The new Suzuki GSX-8T and 8TT, are they just a GSX-8s that's been playing in the dressing up box, or do they bring their own character to the party? I've had a GSX-8s long-termer for quite a while now, and I really enjoy riding that, and I've also now had the chance to ride these two back to back, and here's what I found out. The GSX-8s was unveiled at EICMA 2022 and hit showrooms in early 23. It was an instant hit with journalists, thanks largely to its brand new 776 parallel twin, a smooth, punchy and genuinely likeable engine. That same motor also powers the 8R, the V-Strom 800DE and RE, and I think it's been a bit of a game changer for Suzuki, arguably sparking a revival for the brand. And it's exactly the same package that you'll find on these two bikes. Same engine, same tune, same suspension, same chassis, same TFT dash, same brakes, the lot. The only real changes are styling, a few tweaks to ergonomics that come from that, and a small difference in weight and seat height. So yes, on paper these two bikes are purely a styling exercise, but that's not necessarily a bad thing when they come from such a good base. What I wanted to do was find out if these retro-inspired looks actually bring any extra soul to the party. So let's start with the 8T, which is the most straightforward modern naked bike with a nod to the past. When you look at the 8T, the changes are fairly obvious when you compare it to its older sibling. The larger 16.5 litre tank, when compared to the 8S's 14 litres, gives it broader shoulders and a more muscular stance. The tail section has had a little restyle on the side here, and the seat sits 5mm higher at 815mm and is, to my backside at least, a touch comfier. You also get LED indicators and bar-in mirrors as standard. So with all those underpinnings being the same, it rides exactly the same as an 8S, right? Well, yes and no. Of course, the power, the mapping, the suspension and the brakes are all identical, but that bigger tank changes the feel of the bike. The best way I can describe it is that it gives you a meatier presence between your knees, and that subtly changes the riding sensation. It also feels a bit more like a traditional naked bike in terms of the airflow. The sharper side panels on the 8S push the air around, and this bike is a touch more visceral in that sense. It's not a massive change, but it is noticeable. Was that just a placebo effect? Well, potentially yes, but certainly the airflow through the bike felt different to me. But the thing I love about these bikes is that they're planted, they feel solid and neutral, and that torque delivery is just lovely. A smooth, punchy surge wherever you want it. What Suzuki have done here isn't revolutionary, far from it, but what I think they have done is opened up a market to potential new customers. They've taken what is a very good base and now given it two very distinct extra personalities. The 8T that you see here, a chunky modern retro naked, and the 8TT, a bikini fared old school endurance inspired bike. Both bikes ride the same underneath, but how they make you feel, that's where I think they diverge. Onto the 8TT, and this for me is the bike that really nails that modern retro balance in the 8 Series lineup. It looks fantastic, it rides just as well as the others, and it adds a slightly more focused flavour without losing any of that easygoing nature. The most obvious changes, apart from the colour scheme, are obviously this bikini fairing up front and the belly pan down below. It's clearly part of the 8 Series family, but it's got its own character. For me, it's probably the best looking of the three. There's something about the proportions and that 70s, 80s endurance racer silhouette that just works. But surprisingly, these changes are not just there for show. This bikini fairing does actually alter the riding experience. This fairing does take the wind blast off your chest, making motorway speeds that little bit more relaxed. But like most bikini fairings, it does redirect some air towards your helmet. It's not hard or turbulent, but there is a definite noticeable difference between this, the 8S and the 8T. I found the fairing shape also pushes air around your thighs, which gives the 8T a more enclosed feel. And the other benefit is that it does hide the distinctly modern TFT display, which makes the overall aesthetic, I guess, a little bit more authentic. On the move, the front end does feel a touch more planted. Again, I don't actually know if that's more psychological or an actual physical change, but I do think it is more likely down to the aerodynamics and that little bit of extra weight on the nose. It is subtle, but you can feel it. As I mentioned before, I think it's the TT that really does nail that mix between modern and retro. It looks fantastic, it rides beautifully, and it's got just enough character to make it stand out. So where does that leave us? Because under the skin, the S, the T and the TT are the same package. That smooth, punchy twin, the neutral chassis and easy confidence building handling. Not one single bike is different across the board, they just nudge your experience in a different direction, but they all retain that lovely 8 Series character. If you want the clean, stripped back, modern feel, go 8S. If you love the chunkier look and a bit of retro attitude, the 8T will speak to you. And if you want even more of a 70s or 80s look, the 8TT is the one to pick. As always, I'd love to hear which one you'd pick and why. Before I started recording this video, I reached out on my social media channels to try to understand what people thought these bikes' main competition was, and what came back was quite interesting. The list included the Yamaha XSR 700 and 900, Triumph Trident 660 and Speed Twin 900, the Honda CB 650R, Kawasaki Z900 and 650 RS, BMW R9T, Husqvarna Svartpilen 801 and even a Ducati Scrambler Icon. Quite a wide range of styles, if I'm being honest, but also power, specs and price. So do the T and the TT stack up against these? Now before going any further, let's talk about pricing, because that's where a lot of the online chatter has been. The GSX-8s comes in at 8,299. The 8T comes in at 9,599 and the TT at 9,999. That's a fair old jump, £1,300 from the S to the T and £1,700 from the S to the TT. Some people have been quick to suggest that Suzuki are taking liberties with the pricing on these new models, but are they? What I think potentially has happened here is that Suzuki were very aggressive on the pricing when they brought the 8S to market, and that's somewhat skewed expectations. The T and the TT both bring a larger metal tank, extra finishing details like the LED indicators, bar end mirrors, and in the TT's case that neat little fairing. Could Suzuki have gone further? Sure. Some think that TFT doesn't lean into the retro inspired vibe enough, and I tend to agree, despite it actually being a very good display. I would have liked to have seen a change to the exhaust system, both in looks and sound. Now the stock exhaust is okay, but it does need a little bit more oomph. Not much, but it definitely needs some. However, I think the character of the T and the TT could have been bolstered with a smarter design and a more individual soundtrack. I think the reality is that it's the S that is the outlier. It launched, as I said before, with a very aggressive pricing model. So while the new pricing might sting a little in comparison, is it really that far out of step with the market? And whether you think that extra spend is worth it probably comes down to whether you want the look and the vibe of the T and the TT, or whether the more affordable S already gives you everything you need. So I guess only time and sales figures will tell if Suzuki have got this pricing right. But we also have to remember that there are a lot of people that aren't dumping the asking price on a counter to ride a bike away. So PCP deals do have quite a big bearing on this as well. But let's not make that pricing discussion take us away from the fact that these are very, very good bikes. That engine is superb. It's flexible and smooth with a nice punchy mid-range, and all three of these models are easy riding, neutral handling bikes that are just as happy crawling through town as they are ripping the back roads. And when you look around these bikes, the build quality on them is fantastic too, which is something that I think people often overlook when they talk about Suzukis. Personally, I think Suzuki have done a really good job with these, because you now got three very distinct looking bikes in this range, but they all share the same heart, and that is that fantastic 776 engine. And from my point of view, that can only be a good thing. So let me know which one you'd go for. Would it be the 8T, the TT, or indeed the S? I look forward to reading your comments down below, and if you've got any questions, let me know. Other than that, all I want to say is thanks for watching, and until next time, take care, ride safe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.